Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, how are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Fallout 76 video. So, you may have heard that there are some very significant changes coming to Fallout 76 with the update in December, the Gleaming Depths update. So, in a way this is building on what they've been doing for a while, since the beginning of the summer, but this is something that is absolutely going to affect everybody, and there are a number of different bits and pieces there, but the big one, and the one we're going to focus on today, is perks. So, no matter who you are and what your build is, this is going to impact you on some level at least, and you will need to know what's going on here. Given that this affects such a wide range of perks, it's going to hit different people in different ways and different builds in different places, so I would strongly suggest diving into this. Again, if you want to take your time, I'll link it down below, as usual, but we'll go through everything in a bit of detail here, so you can sort of keep an eye out for things that will catch your playstyle personally. So, the high-level stuff first. Since Milepost Zero in particular, Bethesda have made a number of changes to perks, particularly focusing on the Endurance special stat. So they changed a couple of them to make them more useful. My impression is that what they're trying to do is make Endurance firstly more useful, and secondly create a kind of option for an Endurance-based tank-type build in the game if that's the road you want to go down. So it seems to be the way they're moving with some of these changes. The second major point about this is that a lot of these changes are going to change the way perks work from being a benefit based on the number of ranks you have in, a set benefit based on that, to having them scale with the number of perk points you have into a specific attribute. So it might scale with your charisma, for example, and the more points you have into charisma, the more effective the perk becomes, or it might do that with luck, so on. And this is something that is coming on for a number of different perks across the board, so everybody will need to pay attention to that one, because when you dive in December, there is a very good chance the way your build works will have changed. Doesn't really matter what your build is, it's probably going to get you somewhere, because this does cover quite a wide range of stuff. Easy example that we'll come back to, for example, will be the Starch Genes perk is changing, and anybody with mutations has that perk. So there you go, a nice generalised one there. But basically that means that you will want to focus more on specific attributes of your build. So if you're going for a build that maybe uses a commando thing, normally you'd spec heavily into perception for that. That probably won't change, but if some of the perks are changing, you might want to make sure that you are really leaning into that. The flip side being that taking just one random perk from a list that you don't really use might be much less effective than it was in the past, because you won't have the additional points in that attribute in order to benefit from it. So you might take one endurance perk that you've got one leftover special point for, and you might not get very much benefit because you haven't got anything for it to scale off. So it's something to think about when you're sort of rejigging things, and you will probably want to retweak your build come December. So that's the overview, the high level stuff. Let's get into the specifics. So, a perks update. During Milepost Zero PTS testing and release, we made some focus changes to Vaccinated, Iron Stomach, Thirst Quencher, Natural Resistance perks to make these generally underperforming cards more interesting and easier to incorporate into your builds. We did this by removing extra ranks, lowering the card's cost, and changing the card's effects to scale with primary related stat. In today's PTS update, i.e. the one that will be going live in December, we'll continue this process by modifying more perk cards with the same design goals in mind. This batch of changes primarily focuses on endurance, but you will also see changes to a few cards in other stat categories. That's a pretty solid introduction to how this is going to work. So, first up, Adamantium Skeleton. Its ranks are being reduced from 3 to 1, and where previously you had a percentage based on the number of ranks you had, limb damage reduction will now scale with endurance, so the more points you have into endurance, the more limb damage reduction you get, rather than ranks in the specific perk. That's the trend for the whole thing. So, All Night Long. That one has Hunger of Thirst growing more slowly at night. That's also being reduced to a single rank, and it is reducing the point cost from 1 to 2, and will also affect pre-war alcohol, making that last twice as long. So the question here, and it's not exactly clear on it, is will Hunger and Thirst just grow more slowly as a flat figure, possibly the 60% that is the upper tier, and it incorporates the extra effect involving pre-war alcohol, or is it entirely shifting over to solely affecting alcohol? In some cases here, it does seem that it's a full change of effect. In other cases, it looks like it might just be an additional thing tacked on, so it's a little bit hard to tell with the PTS notes. So something to keep an eye out for in future if you are leaning into the endurance side of things. Bloodsucker. So this is an interesting one. Formerly a charisma perk, this will now be an endurance perk, which makes a lot more sense really with the way it functions. And instead of having 3 ranks, again it will just have 1. And rank 1 will get the effects of former rank 3. So checking what that is. So blood packs greatly satisfy thirst, no longer irradiate, and heal 150% more. So that's what you will get when you take this perk. And the healing bonus will be increased, so it's actually 200%. The interesting thing is it also applies to Cannibal. So the Cannibal perk means that eating human ghouls, super mutants, scorched or mole miners restores health and hunger. So this already was restoring health, so I'm guessing what this additional effect is doing here is satiating some of your hunger, or possibly your thirst. That might make a bit more sense, especially if you wanted to play a vampire type build. But if it's hunger, so... Or maybe it's both. It's a little vague. We'll have to actually see. But there we go. It's going to affect more than just your health, probably your more survival-orientated attributes as well. Speaking of Cannibal, that's also getting a change. It's getting its ranks reduced from 3 to 1, and the amount of healing received and hunger restored at rank 1 is going up. So that's currently listed at... It doesn't actually have a specific number, it just says it restores some, and then the subsequent ranks restore more. Presumably it's either going up to the equivalent of rank 2 or 3. Also, going to free up, for those who are playing Cannibal builds, a couple more perk points for you. Cap Collector. So we're jumping over to the luck tree here. There's a whole bunch of luck stuff in here as well. So that's going from 3 ranks to 1, and now it will apply to all containers, not just cap stashes. And the amount of caps found will scale with luck. So this is an example of something that's really going to be more useful if you lean heavily into a luck build. If you only have a couple of points in there, which could well be the case depending on your build, this will not necessarily be as an effective a way to use any leftover points you might have floating around after you've completed the main body of your build. On the other hand, if they're still floating around, it kind of doesn't matter really, does it? Either way, that does mean it'll free up some extra points that you can use elsewhere, and you'll have a greater range of options to get caps back. Given the introduction of the caravan running feature and the fact that if you want to run subsequent caravans, that does cost additional caps, bringing some caps in might offset the loss of that. On the other hand, when you get to late game, you tend to find yourself with limited amounts of things to spend caps on anyway, so maybe not too much of an issue, but good to know about if you use that perk. So we have First Aid up next, and that one is also getting its ranks reduced from 3 to 1, and the Stimpack healing effect will now scale with your intelligence. So previously, it boosted the amount of healing done by a Stimpack based on the number of ranks you had, and an appropriate level of percentage to go with that. Now that percentage disappears, and it will just heal you more if you lean heavily into an intelligence build, which a lot of players do. So actually, that one's probably going to get significantly more effective for more people than some of the others will. But yeah, good. Also good. Frees up some points and probably makes it more effective to a lot of people. As I say, with a lot of these now scaling with the particular attribute and the number of special points you have in it, it does mean you need to consider what special attribute you are going to lean into and focus your build on a specific attribute a little bit more, rather than focusing quite so much on the gear that you were using. I think there's a bit of a shift in that regard here, sort of a trend across this. I don't think it will fundamentally change the way we look at that, but it will sort of affect the application of the perk cards in that regard. So, Four-Leaf Clover up next. That one is also having its ranks reduced from 3 to 1, and we have a new effect that misses in VATs contribute to the critical meter based on your luck stat. Again, so if you're going to use a lot of VATs criticals, you probably want to lean into luck anyway. That kind of supports that position, so that's quite cool. But the basic effect is that each hit has a chance to fill your critical meter. That's still there, but if you miss, you also get a chance to fill your critical meter a little bit more as well based on the amount of luck. So making this generally more useful and making Four-Leaf Clover trigger more often effectively, I think. From the sound of this, the tone, it implies that every time you miss, you'll get a small contribution to your critical meter. So that'll basically mean if you want to go for a crit-heavy build, then this will actually make that a lot more viable, because you're always going to be boosting your critical meter, and the critical meter will rise faster than it did previously. And of course, once again, more perk points to use elsewhere should you want to. So, swing back over to Charisma, the Hard Bargain perk. Currently, it reduces the costs and increases the amount of caps you get from selling to NPC vendors, robots usually. This is only going to be having the one perk again, and now will get you a flat, effective +7 bonus to your Charisma when you are bartering with NPCs. So this one is being simplified a lot, because it's not quite as widely impactful, I suspect. So yeah, it'll just give you a flat bonus and take up less space in your loadout, which is also cool. So, jumping back over to luck for Junk Shield. This is, again, having its ranks reduced. It'll now work in Power Armor, which it didn't previously. Basically, it gives you damage resistance based on the amount of junk items in your inventory, and it does scale with the amount of stuff you're carrying. It will also work, as well as now being in Power Armor, with a luck-based scaling on top of, from the look of this, its current setup. So yeah, the more junk you have, the more protection you'll get, and that will also be boosted by your luck stat. So yeah, Junk Shield definitely getting a little bit more useful there. Even when you only have a tiny little bit of stuff, it will actually give you a little bit more of a benefit than it did previously. So that's definitely a buff to that one. So jumping back to Endurance, Life Giver is getting a change. That one again, losing its ranks, going down to just a single rank card. And it will again scale with your stat, in this case Endurance, where previously ranks gave you a flat boost to your maximum health. This will be number of points into Endurance will give you a boost to your health, which it kind of does anyway, but this is obviously amplifying that effect. So, Lone Wanderer. This one I think might actually, for the most part, be a bit of a net loss. This one's losing its ranks, as per, we're just getting to a single rank, and its AP and defense bonus will scale based on Charisma. So, yeah, rather than being a flat boost, you'll need more points into Charisma in order to benefit. Now, if you're a solo player, unless you're the type who jumps into a public team and then runs off and does your own thing, if you tend to avoid people, or if you tend to play on a private server, if you're a Fallout First player, something like that, you're probably going to get less benefit from this, because chances are your build probably won't be drawing on a great deal of Charisma anyway, because many of those perks do depend on you being on a team. So this might be a bit of a loss, actually, but something to be aware of if you are somebody who takes advantage of Lone Wanderer. Night Eyes. This is an interesting one. It gives you night vision at night, currently, but they're removing that requirement, and now it will give you night vision anytime you have the perk attached. Now, when the game first came out, and it was very, very dark at night, that would have been potentially quite useful. But due to player feedback, they pulled that the other direction and made the nights much lighter. Actually, in my opinion, they went too far in that direction, but anyway. So this is kind of not that useful. My theory, however, is that it will be a bit more useful when you're underground, if you're diving into a mine or something like that, for example. It'll be a bit more useful, or any internal location that tends to be dark. With this arriving in December alongside the Gleaming Depths, I am wondering whether or not there might be some particularly dark areas within that raid wherein this might be a bit more useful to you. So it might be hard to see down there while you're running through it. If that's the case, it might be one that you want to drop into a specific loadout for running the Gleaming Depths, because assuming this goes reasonably well, there's a very good chance they'll add subsequent raids on down the line and flesh out this feature as time goes on, in which case having a specific loadout for those raids might be a thing to consider. In which case, Night Eyes might get slightly more useful for you, and you may wish to consider that in the wider loadout. But yeah, definitely a relatively light touch perk and less useful one that may or may not be about to get situationally more useful. Okay, so Professional Drinker. This is a one-off perk card that removes the chance you'll get addicted to alcohol, so if you use that a lot in your build, it's being reduced in its cost from currently 3 perk points down to 2. So take up less space in your loadout, giving you more options. Ricochet. This one's getting a bit of an overhaul. We're jumping back over to luck here. It's getting reduced from 3 ranks to 1, and as you can probably guess, it will be now scaling on luck. So how this will work is that Deflect Chance will scale based on the number of points you have into luck. The effect is also changing a little bit, and this will mean it grants a chance to reflect 100% of incoming damage back on the attacker, and reduce the damage you take by 50%. The Deflect Chance will receive a bonus when you're wearing heavy armor or power armor, so that's quite cool. And that's going to be a 50% multiplier, so if you're wearing heavy armor, Ricochet just got a whole lot more useful, which kind of makes sense. And while you're in power armor, the amount of damage reflected is going to be doubled, so they will take twice the amount of damage that they were trying to inflict on you, while you still only take 50%, assuming it triggers, which will be determined by your luck stat. So there we go, definitely quite an overhaul there, but it also opens up a wider range of potential uses for the Ricochet perk. So Bullet Shield, I'm not quite sure what to make of this change. They're moving it from Strength to Endurance, which is good. So this perk affects heavy gun-wielding players, And taking out of strength basically means you don't have to choose between bullet shield and another heavy gun related perk, because there's more perks that you might want in the strength tree than you can fit in there at the moment. So the shift is a good thing. It adds an additional option into what's available for heavy gun builds, so that's quite cool. Now what I'm curious about here is whether the new effect is replacing the old effect or is in addition to the old effect. So we've got a 4th rank. The current effect is that your damage resistance goes up while you're firing a heavy gun, based on the number of ranks. This says 5% chance to deflect range attacks for 6 seconds while firing a heavy weapon. I'm guessing, given that it's for a period of 6 seconds, that it will replace the original effect and will be up to a 20% chance if you have it maxed out with 4 ranks. That would seem like the likely scenario, so you'll have a 20% chance to reflect all range damage for 6 seconds. That, I think, is going to be the way. But yeah, that should make this whole perk considerably more viable a pick for heavy gun players, which is fun. Serendipity is getting an overhaul, and again, a shift to scaling based on luck. So going from 3 ranks to 1 again, and the evade chance, while under 30% life, is a change. I think it's currently 20%. And the amount of chance to evade damage will go up based on your luck stats. And it provides a chance to avoid all incoming damage from direct attacks, and can only happen once every 2 seconds and not while you're over encumbered or in power armor. So there we go. We'll now scale based on your luck and will kick in slightly sooner. Evasive, that one's also having its ranks reduced, and it's getting the new effect where it will increase your evade chance based on agility. So that is just a full rework of the perk there. So takes up less space and scales based on your agility. If you happen to have a build that uses that, that might become potentially more useful, or if it's just a perk that you take with spare points, probably less useful. This is a big one for everybody. Starched jeans. Cool, it's been reduced from 2 to 1 rank, so that frees up a special point, and it's moved from luck to endurance. And the reason this is particularly important is because I bet that won't be accounted for automatically, and you will need to deal with that manually. So when this comes in, if you have mutations, then you need to change this straight away, or attend to this straight away, so that you don't accidentally use Radaway and cure a mutation that you want by accident, because you will no longer have starch genes in place until you go and effectively retake the perk. So be aware of this change. It still does the same thing, it costs less to have it than it used to, i.e. prevent you from losing your mutations, but because it's changing the column it's in, you may need to attend to this manually. So that is an important one. The last one on the list is Through Hiker. So Through Hiker is being moved from agility to endurance, and it does what it has done the whole time, which is reduce the weight of your food and drink that you're carrying. Putting it into endurance makes it an easier pick, because there are more options and more space effectively in the endurance tree to pick and choose your perks. Than the agility tree, there are more high priority perks in the agility tree. That can mean Through Hiker gets pushed out, which makes sense. On the other hand, it's reducing the weight of something, so strength tree would kind of make more sense, but probably be less practical. So I think it's just a small practical shift that. But there we go. Lots of details, lots of things changing. Different things will affect different people. I think come December, it's probably a good time to sit down and maybe rework your builds, your loadouts, that sort of thing. Some because the changes will necessitate that, and some because there's stuff here to take advantage of that you may not have been able to take advantage before. So it's definitely going to be one to sit down and examine. As I said before, I'm going to link all this down below. There is an extensive set of patch notes for what's currently on the PTS. This is in there, so you should be able to find that no problem. Definitely worth having a little bit of a look at ahead of its going live. And we'll come back to talking about this a lot nearer the time, I'm sure. So, I hope you guys found that useful and informative. I know it's quite a detailed, wordy one, but it's definitely important information, so if you did find the video useful, please do consider dropping subs and likes. I very, very much appreciate. Down below, we've got social media links, channel memberships, and that notification bell if you want to keep up with all the uploads and Fallout content. We have loads of it here. And join us for live streams as well if you get a chance. We've got 76 on the go, we've got some other bits and pieces around Fallout on the go, and some other games outside of the Bethesda sphere as well, which have been really, really good fun lately too. So I'd love to see you there. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.